So, Musya, let me just start with you. Can you talk a little bit about what the conversation about Zionism and about the state of Israel was like when you were growing up in Lubavitch Chabad, at home, in school, in the community? What was the perspective that you got?
Sure. So from what I can remember, it was um, very security oriented, always a focus on Jewish security and Jewish lives and doing what needs to be done to protect Jews in Israel. And it was understood that we needed to support Jews in Israel. Um, so that we can support their survival. But the word Zionism uh, was discouraged, and we never it was never framed as Zionist. And we were always told explicitly that Chabad is not uh, does not believe in Zionism or does not approve of Zionism. Um, and I think that there is a misconception about what Haredi communities believe around Israel, that there are ideas about um, like messianic aspirations. But it was always very clear growing up that um, the reason that Lubavitch is so supportive of Israel is to support the Jews who live there, because that's Lubavitch's uh, mission in general. The Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Um, uh, or the most recent Lubavitcher Rebbe made his mission supporting Jewish life all around the world. And so that was the goal of being so supportive of Israel and its survival. The Israeli state existed as a political reality that there was nothing we could do anything about. And the thinking was to try to undo that or to fight it would put Jews in harm's way. And so we're not going to do any of that. Um, but we're not going to create a political party in the Knesset. We aren't going to explicitly endorse any any coalition or party, but we will be there for Jewish people.
One more question, you said, before I go to Meyer. My understanding is that previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's wrote very critically of the Zionist movement. Earlier in the 20th century. How did you how did you understand how as you growing up in Chabad, how did people reconcile this earlier very strong opposition and criticism of the Zionist movement to Chabad kind of making peace with the state of Israel in a way in this moment?
So I think that the general position of Hasidic rabbis was that by creating a sovereign Jewish state, Jews were actually acting preemptively against God, who is supposed to bring the redemption. And I never got the sense growing up that that was truly um, Lubavitch's stance. Um, there wasn't this sense of like the Jews in Israel are actively sinning by doing this, but more, and Meyer, correct me if I'm wrong on that, because um, I just don't recall ever being told, or I don't recall that being emphasized. But what I do recall is that Zionism was secular, and that it provided Jews with an alternative to religion, and that was something that Chabad found threatening and problematic.
Um, Mayor, maybe you can talk about anything with the similarities, but also differences, what the conversation was like in the Satmar community for you growing up about Zionism and about the state of Israel.
Yeah, thank you. I want to add first a little bit of my understanding of not like, not to mitigate, but just to add on to what Musya was saying, that there are instances of even the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the latest one, whenever there was like attributed a religious or spiritual component of redemption to Zionism, he would be very actually agitated and provoked almost. He'll say like, no, this is not redemption. This is a big mess that like and like Musya said, the whole like political position of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the 90s has to also be like taken into account. Like I grew up in the 90s, and there was like at the same time there was like Peter, you remember like the protests for the Russian Jews, the
Mhm.
refuseniks, and I think like Jewish survival is not the same as it is now. It was like we were literally still like reeling from the whole like it was still the post-Holocaust Jewish world order was still being shaped, and everything was very precarious and fragile, and like Musya said, it was like a certain like Lubavitch Rebbe's was like his actions and words were a lot about like Jewish safety, and I think that even you mentioned that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe's position was anti-Zionist. I don't think the last Lubavitcher Rebbe's position was inherently different.
Mhm.
So to speak about the difference of Satmar and Lubavitch, I brought it up because Lubavitch was actually aligned with Satmar um, previously. So to just frame the Orthodox position on Zionism, it's important to like sort of like I would say like to frame it into like three periods. There is the period when Zionism was an idea, an ideology, and it was rejected across the board by all Orthodox Jews, by every religious Jews, because at that time there were three streams of within Judaism of answering the Jewish question. There was the Zionism. There was the Orthodox Jews who believed in divine providence of like that we don't interfere like with historical events um and then there was the two mainstreams were the socialist Bundists and the Zionists. And in that sense, I think it was the religious people who aligned with Zionism were actually less than those who were aligned with socialism and Bundism. It was very fringe within the Orthodox world. Everything is changing when the
You're talking about
reality.
that. We're talking about the late 19th and early 20th century now.
Right,
Yeah.
right. But then when Zionism becomes a political reality, then there is and that like I would say is in the 1930s already. Then there's like a split of the Agudas Yisrael fraction in the Orthodox world, who some in that movement, not all, are saying that since this is a feasible possibility, we need to consider it, and especially that the ground in Europe was burning, as an option for Jewish survival to collaborate with the Zionist organizations, whether it is to encourage Aliyah to Israel. Um, so, and in that sense, there was the Aguda camp, and then there was the I think the majority, not the majority, but like at least half of the Orthodox and Hasidic communities who were not part of the Aguda, and that includes Chabad and Satmar, actually. The Chabad rabbis were not part of Aguda. They did not believe that we should collaborate or cooperate with Zionist organizations to encourage or bring about the creation of a state. Then there's the third
You're talking about the 30s. You're talking about the 30s now.
30s up to 1950. Yeah. What happens in the 1948, 1950, what we refer as like, the creation of the State of Israel and for the Palestinians, the Nakba, is that there is elections to the Israeli parliament. And then another question arises, are even among those who are viewing favorably the possibility of Zionism or some sort of homeland in the state of Israel. And of course, it's also important to add the context that it wasn't clear what that state would look like, what that homeland would look like. Would it be a sovereign state? Would it be part of like a multi-ethnic state? Um, and then there was the question of the parliamentary elections. And interestingly enough, Satmar and Chabad took similar but different positions. Like Musya mentioned, Chabad did not officially introduce representatives in the Parliament of Israel, in the Knesset, but they were not opposed to the idea of voting in the elections, of participating in the civil process. Um, just one second. Versus Satmar and other affiliated Satmar, the approach that they had is that although Israel is a reality and they would not tell people not to pay taxes, they actually discouraged civil participation in the election. Satmars don't vote still till today in the Israeli parliament, even those who reside in Israel. That is their protest on the fact that the state is founded and established not in accordance to halacha or to Jewish law because of the belief that Musya mentioned of that we shall not take active steps to like sort of like interfering with God's bigger plan of what he plans on doing with this world. So um, growing up, to back to your question, Satmar, um, we 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 had like a in our upbringing, Zionism was considered a form of heresy and a form of in very clearly um, in opposition with the Torah and in some way uh, even like very like considered like the root of evil or like a lot of like very strong opposition. Yet when Satmar's would, but that doesn't mean that Satmar did not have at all a certain concern for Jewish life and even like we would still see the Jews in Israel as our kin and people we need to like care about. And so part of Satmar Rebbe's argument was that the state of Israel in the big picture is not actually something that is good for Jewish safety. So there was also a religious component, but there was also a political component to Satmar Rebbe's philosophy, believing that it is harming Jewish safety